Hi, my name is Mr. Bros, and today we're going to look at going over how to use your unpacking document to create a lesson plan from your standards. So, first thing I would do is Google your standards, whatever content is. Today I'm going to look at a world history content, and the Google search I usually do is NC, whatever my subject is, standards, and then this unpacked. Unpack's key because then that gets you the unpacking document. If you're just looking at the standards, which is useful also, sometimes it can be kind of non-specific or vague. So this unpacking document, what DPI has done is really pull it apart and let you know more involved of what you need to do for the different standards, what the students need to know, what to be able to do, what that looks like. It's still pretty vague, but it does give you more of a guideline of where to go with that standard. So let's say that these first standards for world history, these are all just historical thinking skills. So let's say I'm a few weeks into the course and maybe I'm doing something on, let's say, social classes. So this would be the standard, world history, history 2.8. So we're in the second standard and we're on this point 8 part of it. And I need to know, the students need to know pretty much just what is social class, social structure, and how that impacts different people. And you can get more specific here. And here's some specifics: caste system dealing with India and Hinduism. Maybe they need to know some more specifics from different cultures. But in general, we need to know some of these key concepts. So if we're making a lesson plan based on this standard, this is where we're at in here. Let's say it looks something like this. You put your teacher name here. So I would put, Mr. Barrows. Our subject would be world history. Grade. Let's say we're teaching that to freshmen. Lesson. Let's say this is social class, and whatever the date is you're teaching it. The enduring understanding here is fairly important. This is a big overarching idea. So this standard as a whole, what are we trying to do? So specifically, we're looking at this standard here, 2.8, and we're talking about class. Maybe we need students to understand, based on the unpacking document, that societies depend on social structure, social class for production, but they also need that balance between civil unrest, because if you have too much oppression, maybe then it leads to revolution, which would be one of the next standards going forward. So this is a good way to have a kind of bridge to a following standard. But ideally, this enduring understanding here, this is like the forest that you want the students to see, that big picture. And then these essential questions here, these are like the trees. These are the trees that make up that forest. So these are the really important things that students need to know to understand that standard as a whole. All right, so a good essential question: how does social structure affect civilizations? That's okay, because it can give you a couple different answers, but a good essential question should be answered with an argument, opinions. It shouldn't be answered with one word. So what effect does social mobility have on a society? You're still kind of on that base level. This one, in what ways does class divide power in a civilization? That's an interesting question, because you can argue it a lot of different ways, a lot of different examples. And if we can answer these things, then I believe we understand our enduring understanding. The objective, this is very specific to what do you want the students to be able to do. We want them to understand the role of class structure. We want them to be able to identify the need and results of social mobility, what it looks like when you have it, what it looks like when you don't have it, why you would need it, why you wouldn't need it in a society, and what the impacts are. This is the new one, this career competency. This is something that will come out in the PLCs, but ideally this is something that you want to integrate within the lesson. All right, so now we need to build the lesson. So there's a lot to talk about here, and the first thing that you want to do is connect to prior knowledge. So what do students need to know about social class, social structure? Well, that helps them get a job. And everybody probably wants to have money or have things. So one of the first things I would do is use that. The warm-up question then that I use or would use is something that every student should be able to answer, have an opinion on. Would you rather love your job and make a little money, or hate your job and make a lot of money? And why is that? That's going to get students talking, ideally. However, which way you want to do it, it should introduce you to the conversation of, well, why do we have jobs? Why go to school? Why go to college? What's the point? Is money the ultimate goal? All those things. The idea here, though, is to just start bridging to content knowledge. So whatever conversation happens here, this is supposed to hook our students going forward. So for our introduction, let's say we have that question, and we're going to discuss the role of money and power in class. And you could do that a couple different ways. Maybe it's a group debate. It could be a group talk. It could be a classroom talk as a whole. Maybe it's a think, pair, share. Doesn't matter. How are you going to do that? And then how are you going to accommodate? Well, we need to explain vocab. We definitely want students to be on the same page. Vocab. All right. Explain terms. That wants to go. We maybe want to give extended time for students who maybe need that more conversation. Maybe we have something like pulling out of a hat for names, whatever you want to do. All right, so now we got to get into the body of our lesson. So first thing that I would like to do is think about who is doing the teaching. So right now there's really two important key terms that they need to know. They need to know social mobility and social class. So how are you going to introduce those terms? One way you could do it is by doing some sort of group talk, group conversation thing, just to let them act it out before they even know what they're doing. So this right here, if you had students in a group, maybe give them roles, give them a time limit, all those things where they have to rank these different classes, and they rank it based on how they see them being important. And the idea here is that they're automatically making a class structure. So this is a group conversation that they're having. They're using each other's vocab, and that's something that we can build upon. So we're scaffolding up that knowledge. So the next thing maybe we want to do is actually introduce the define word, so that way they have it. So this is something the teacher would do. So maybe we have that group talk rank classes, and then that could be a classroom conversation too. Then we want to define terms, social class, and mobility. And the idea here is we want them to understand what it is specifically. I try to connect to their prior knowledge. So this is Drake, and it's just a funny meme that kids like. This is a video game ranking system, so you're trying to connect to what they know. They may know Fortnite, and there's ranks in Fortnite, those kind of things. So social class, whenever you're introducing vocab, understand that it's easier for kids to learn it if they can connect it to something that they already understand, prior knowledge. They may already understand video games or music or what have you. And then once you give them the vocab term, it's not enough just to define it, write them down. We need to talk about it, apply it, discuss it. So right here we have a pretty interesting picture. Visual aids, these help some students. So they literally could tell you, all right, if you ask the kids apply that social class vocab to this picture, they could probably talk about it, pull it apart, unpack it. They could tell you who's the bottom, who's the top. They could tell you that there's definitely an unequal social class here. And then you can have a moral conversation about, like, is this right? Is this wrong? What's going on here? And apply it to kind of a global issues perspective. But the idea is you're applying that vocab that we just gave them. Here's another example. Again, just another visual. They could probably already start telling you that there's an upper and a lower class, and this is stuff that, again, it's all prior knowledge that they have. And then this is an interesting thing we can do. we want them now to use it academically, so we need them to write about it. So here we want to do a silent debate, and how this would work is give the students a question, and they would have a scrap piece of paper, and they would answer that first question: does society need social class? So we just talked about what it was. We saw 2 examples. We saw visuals. Now they're writing and they're kind of formulating, do we need it? And this is an opinion. It's not right. It's not wrong. But they should have an argument. They should have some sort of proof to add to that argument. And we're giving them the vocab here again. They're seeing again. We give them examples. And depending on what they say, it's fine. But then we're going to ask the students to pass the paper, rotate it. And then they have a new paper in front of them. And regardless of what their original argument is, I would ask them to argue against that position. And the idea here is now we're seeing 2 different sides. Even if they disagree with what they're saying, it's a good skill, it's a critical thinking skill to step out of it, have perspective, and all those things. And then I would have them pass the paper one more time. And now the student is seeing 2 different arguments. They're seeing argument A, argument B. And I would ask that third student to summarize the 2 positions. So now they are combining the arguments, but again, we're just writing about content. And this is very important to do because students need to keep applying those vocab terms. It's not okay just to teach vocabulary in isolation of itself. Right? And once we have that, maybe throughout the whole time you're discussing, you call on different students. The thing that's good about a silent debate that is written is you get 100% participation. Sometimes when you have verbal debates or verbal discussions, you have your more dominant students talking. So this gives a chance for everybody to have a voice, everybody to get credit, and everybody to have an opinion and understand that their opinion matters. And it's not a right or a wrong thing. Then maybe we introduce our next vocab, social mobility, and we could talk about it. And then we want to apply it now to content specifics. So now we have a really general understanding of what we're talking about. And now we're going to go into a nuanced thing, which is a very specific case study. And this case study is going back to the standards. It's going back to that unpacking document, which is talking about the caste system. So what I also like to do is apply to modern day, apply to now. So this would be a video. This video would be a short, manageable video. And I would always give the students something that they need to do while they're watching the video. So some sort of graphic organizer. So graphic organizer while watching video. And I'm going to clean all this up. This is just me kind of brainstorming. A lesson plan does not need to be perfect on the first go around. In fact, it probably is not going to be. So while maybe I have them do a T-chart, and on the left we have lower class, on the right upper class, and maybe as they're watching they're writing characteristics of the upper and lower, or what it looks like, so they can start identifying and applying the knowledge that they had. All right, once we watch the video, which it's a pretty good video. It's about 10 minutes. I would frequently stop and talk about it. Now we need to apply what we learned. So using that graphic organizer, using our terms, I would like them to have 2 paragraphs and describe a couple different things, but describe mobility, what it looks like, social class. You could have them unpack the video. You could have them write about, what does the upper and lower look like? Is that a problem? What's an ideal civilization look like? So now they're formulating their own opinion and their own argument about what does social class look like? Why is it important? The idea here is that they need to compare and contrast. They need to analyze. They need to start having opinions about the content. And their questions need to be driven from their understanding, their learning. So this gives them a chance to really just formulate what they're learning about. It's not we're learning about a specific thing and then move on. After that, I would have a bigger classroom discussion. So now this is we as a whole. What are we looking at? What are we learning? And I would try to apply it to something relevant today. So we could talk about something like the American dream and that is something that impacts their life now. So relevancy again is very key. And then what it looks like today, and then maybe